Okay, so I think it's 1:02. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. And today we're going to do Excel Pivot Table Part 1. My name is Marie Desmaf Capagal from the MTA Organizational Design and Development Team, and specifically in the Computer Training Team. So this afternoon, this class is going to be recorded, and recordings will be shared to all of you once it becomes available. The presentation I'm going to use, which includes some references, will be shared to all of you via email and including the exercises that I will use for the class. However, if you have your own data, you could use that to practice all the concept I'm going to show today. We have the chat and the Q&A open, available for you. If you have any question, feel free to type your question in the chat or in the Q&A. Okay, so let me start by talking about our objective for today. And I'm just going to hide my video so you could focus on our presentation. There we go. Okay, so today's learning objective. Participants will be able to prepare data for analysis, and you're going to create a pivot table from the local data source, the multiple source, and external data source. Okay, and what is really a pivot table? So, a pivot table is an interactive way to quickly summarize large amounts of data. You could use a pivot table to analyze numerical data in detail. It can group item into categories. It can actually count the number of items in each category and can sum the item's value. Well, also, pivot charts can complement the pivot table by adding visualization to the summary data in pivot table and to allow you to easily see comparison, patterns, and trends. Both pivot tables and pivot chart enable you to make an informed decision about critical data in your enterprise. So, what is pivot table specially designed for? So it is designed for querying large amount of data in many user-friendly ways. It is used for subtotaling and aggregating numerical data, summarizing data by categories and subcategories, and creating custom calculations and formula. It can expand a collapse level of data to focus your result and drill down to details from the summary data for areas of interest to you. And what's amazing is it could move rows to columns or column to rows, and that's basically why it's called pivoting, to see the different summaries of source data. You can also filter, sort, and group and conditionally format the most useful and interesting subset of data, enabling you to focus on just the information you wanted. And of course, the last but not the least, it will be present concise and attractive and annotated online and printed reports. Now, there are guidelines to prepare data. Okay, and this is the first thing that everybody should be aware of. First, your data shouldn't have any empty rows or columns. It must have only one single row heading. There is no filter applied. There are no subtotals. There are not duplicate data entries or no duplicate entries. And of course, data are formatted based on the data type. So to demonstrate, I'm just going to minimize this for a few minutes and I'm going to share with you an Excel file. Um, I have used this file. This is an old report that we actually, you could see names and titles and course codes, but these are all mixed up just to share with you some information and practical ways of using it, especially for us in this agency. This data I use to run reports and I generate the report from PeopleSoft, convert it into Excel, and utilize it to use pivot table to create my summary. So by following the guidelines that we are first told, it must only have a single row heading. So you notice on top, I have a lot of information right there. So this is the only heading that I need, which is in row 16. Now going down, okay, all the way down, we're at the end of my worksheet. My last row is on 13,482. So these are additional information. So what are the first thing that we have to do? Okay. So you notice that you have some information on the top, you have information at the bottom. So first, let me take this information at the bottom. Okay. Right click on it and get rid of it. I don't need those. Then I would simply press Control Home, go to the top of the screen, and I have this data. So allow me to select all of those rows and right click and delete. So I now have a single heading. Okay. So that's one of the requirements that has been completed. So allow me to just resave this file, save us, just in case something goes wrong. Okay. And let me call it my exercise file for pivot table. There we go. Okay. So the next thing I have to do is, of course, to find out that my data should not have any empty rows or column. So how do we find empty rows or column or even cells, right? So what you are going to do is in the home ribbon, under the editing group, in the find and select, if you click on the drop down arrow, if you go to special, okay, and right here, I could select blanks, okay, and simply click OK. And Excel will start searching. There you go. So it's Excel started searching and it found N695, that cell. You see it down there? And succeeding cells are empty cells. So how do we populate it? So N695 is where we are right now. So you could populate it with either 0 or put NA into it for your report. So it's not an empty cell. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type N/A. After doing that, I will simply hold down the Control key and hit the Enter key to populate all of the empty cells with NA. Okay, and that will actually be able to complete that. So let me continue and save the changes. Let me press Control Home. Looking at top, there is no filter applied. I don't see filtering. There are no subtotals. So far, so good with my list. And doesn't look I have any kind of duplicate. And they have been, you could actually take a look at your data format. So this is text. These are text. Okay. So these are things that you have to do. And look at that. These are dates. So just make sure that each column is actually based on the data type that they belong. So what's the next step? So once you have done that, we're ready to create our pivot table. So select any cell or simply just be in any cell within the list. Then you go to the insert ribbon. In the insert ribbon, notice under the tables group, you see pivot table on the left, right? You could just simply click on the pivot table icon to activate the pivot table. However, if you notice, there is a recommended pivot table. When you're rushing, and you don't really have time to design, but you would like to take advantage of the different templates, you could use the recommended pivot table. I will demonstrate this to you in a few, but allow me to first to do it from scratch. So let me click on the pivot table. Now, notice in the pivot table dialog box that's now in front of us, it says pivot table from table or range. So this is a list, this is a range. And it uses the name of the worksheet and it gave you the entire range in absolute cell reference. Okay, from A1 to R 13,466 row. And by default, you choose where you want your pivot table to be placed. By default, the radio button is in the new worksheet. Okay. Once you see it right there, all you have to do is simply click on OK. Okay. So now you now see a page, right? A new worksheet right in front of the original or the list that you have, right? And you would now see that you have a layout on your left. And on your right are the pivot table fields listing. So allow me to just show you first the pivot table field task pane. This is how you call it, the pivot table task pane. Notice the first one you have here, you have normally the pivot table would actually look like this, where you have the field section and area section stacked to be like this. You have the listing and the different fields that you would like to, areas that you would like to drag it from. And then, of course, I prefer to use this field section and area section side by side so I could see the complete list of my fields. Okay, these are the column headings that I could actually drag and use to select. Now, as I mentioned earlier, okay, so these are different sections. Notice first, let's start from the list of your fields. You have the list of all the column headings. And you have a field check boxes. Field list with the check boxes allows you to be able, if you put a check mark right before each field or column heading, Excel will automatically align it or put it in the column or in the row. And how do they determine which one to be placed on the column, rows, or values? Normally, non-numeric fields are added to the row area. In the values are summarized numeric values in the pivot table. And of course, in the column, typically are the online analytical processing date and time hierarchy added to the column area. And of course, you see the filter on top. You see the filter? Filters are fields shown as top level of the report as a filter criteria for a pivot table. So what do we want to achieve in this pivot table? So you see on the original list, you have a list of the different employees and their names, their employee status, the job code, the title, and the course name that they have taken, whether they have completed it, the start date, and the end date. So you wanted to summarize them, right? And you see all of those, and you see the pay business unit. So you wanted to sort and organize them and create a report showing you, let's say, for instance, on this structure pivot table, to answer the question and be able to create a pivot table to show how many employees from each business unit have completed the mandated training. Okay, so there are few items. So you would like to count because you said how many employees. So you would like to count the number of employees by using the employee ID number. So I would like to use the employee ID number to be able to count, right? So I would simply drag employee ID number to the values. By dragging, I'm able to specify where I would like to position it. Now, this answer how many part of the question. However, pivot table will show automatically the sum function of the employee. And that's what you see right there. It's totaling all the employee ID number. Okay. So we wanted to count. So what do? We're going to change, you know, this and replace the sum function with a count function. And how do we do that? We simply click on the drop down arrow next to it, value setting. And in here, I do not want to get the sum, but I would like to get the count. So simply count of the employee ID number, simply click on OK, and that gives me the realistic, number of employees, 13,465. Remember the count we have a while ago was 13,466, including the column heading. Okay. Next, we wanted to find out again how many employees from each business unit. So we wanted to categorize them by business unit. So we use the pay business unit and we drag it to your row area. And there you go. This answer each of the business unit part of the question. Each row in the pivot table will summarize the count per business unit, and it will give you the total at the end. Now, if you wanted to be more specific, notice that you might have additional information that you might want to add. For instance, I could bring over the department under the pay business unit. So these are the different departments that made up of the bridges and tunnel. Okay. And you have your information right there. So you could keep on adding information. Okay. You could even be more specific. I could even put the name of the employee. Okay. And put it under here to see who have taken it. See how beautiful? So you could be very detailed to be able to identify them. Now, what if you want to remove them? All you have to do is drag it and drag it back to the list. Now, to be able to see all of them, you notice the minus sign in your pivot table analyze, okay? And if I click right here on one of the business unit, if you notice right here, you see the under the active fields, I have the plus sign, which means expand. And I have the minus sign, which means to collapse. So when I see the minus sign, I simply collapse, and I would like to collapse all of them. I could use this and all of them will collapse. If I want to expand them one by one just to see a specific, let's say I just want to see specifically New York City Transit, you click on the plus sign and it will expand. Again, you click on it and it will collapse. Beautiful, right? Now, next, you would like to find out, are they all active employees? Okay, so it's another way of filtering. That's a question, but you would like to filter. So then I could actually also put it in the column to be able to determine how many of these 81 are active or what are the status, right? So if you look at your employee status, there you go. Okay, I could put it in the column area to be able to see, are they on leave, leave with pay, retired, suspended, terminated, and that will give you the grand total. So active are just like this capital and construction, you have 93 active. I have one retired, one terminated. That gives me a total of 95. You could be very detailed. However, I could also move this employee status and put it into the filter. That makes it interactive. So I wanted to just basically see, take a look. So now it's in the filtering. It's now up here, employee status, all. I click on the drop-down arrow. I would like to select multiple items. So now you see a check mark in each of these titles or status. To remove the check mark, you click on the check box right before the all. And I just wanted to see and filter the active, how many are really active. So I click on active, I click OK, and that gives me the active. Notice how the number went down to 13,421. Okay, so that allows you to be able to navigate. So these are some of your options. So you could move them around, you could play around, you could say, take a look at this. Can I move around my information? Okay. So yes, I can. So to remove first the filter, to put it back, just click on all, everything is back. So filter is there. You're back to your original number, 13,465. You could change the data view by dragging the fields to other area in the pivot table. For instance, um, allow me to remove first. Okay, let's say from here, I have just the pay business unit and the department, right? What if I put the pay business unit in the column? There you go. And these are the departments. What if I decide to just um, remove my department, okay? Or put my employee status right there for the department. Take a look at how it looks. If I remove the department, and this is another way of viewing my report, if this is a good way of analyzing it, you see, that makes it interactive. Nobody can tell you the way you do it is wrong as long as it will answer the conditions you have set and be able to see the summary you wish to obtain without putting or looking at the big picture. Look at this. This is a lot of information. This is all what I need to find out how many numbers of employees for every, you know, for every what do you call this business unit, and how many are those are active on leave, leave without pay, retired, suspended, and terminal. Beautiful, isn't it? So far, so good. Do you have any question? Okay. No, if not, I have more things to show you. So I'm going to proceed. So next, we're going to create a pivot table from using multiple local data source. Now that we have created a pivot table from a single table, which we actually did, right? We are now going to get data coming from multiple worksheets, okay, that would actually be summarized. So when you do that, when you're using more than one table, okay, in Excel, when in Excel 2016, that's where it first started, okay, the data model was introduced. Data model is used to combine or join in data from multiple tables. Again, data models, it allows you to combine or join in data from multiple tables. This enables you to build a relational data source in a workbook. You could add data to the data model when you insert a pivot table. So how does Microsoft describe a data model? A data model allows you to integrate data from multiple tables, effectively building a relational data source inside an Excel workbook. Within Excel, data models are used transparently, providing tabular data used in a pivot table and pivot chart. So let me allow me to show you and demonstrate to you how to use this data model. So let me minimize this. Let me save this first. So just in case we would like to review this later on, allow me to minimize this and get another Excel workbook. Take a look. In this workbook, which I call it multiple table, I have 3 worksheets in it. Names, again, these are old files that Rafael and I used, to be able to find out the number of students that comes into our class, names, attendance, and classes. Okay. So I have 3 tables in here. So the first step to be able, before creating the data model, right? When you have multiple like this, first, let me just resave this to save my original. So I save as, and let me call it my multiple table. There you go. Okay. So I always do that just in case something goes wrong with the original. I still, during the exercise, I still have the original intact. Okay, so the best thing to do is to create a name table from data in the first table. So if some of you have experience creating a table out of a list in Excel, you know what I'm talking about. It is a new feature that Excel have that it could easily convert a list into a table. So allow me to show you different ways of naming tables and converting a data into a table. So the first is a worksheet called names, right? So just make sure your insertion point is within the list, right? And in the insert ribbon, you see tables. Under the tables group, you see tables, right? Simply click on table. You will see a dialog box and notice how this automatically selected the range. Where is the data for your table? Is the first question. And it gives you the range, the list of the items in worksheet one. And make sure it says my table has headers, has a check mark in it, and that is my header. All you have to do is simply click OK and notice the list is now converted to a table. Take a look. There's new contextual ribbon called table design, and this is called table one. Instead of table one, let's name this. I click on it and give it a name, the name of the worksheet called names. Hit the enter key, and that gives me my table. Next, I go to attendance. How do we convert this list to a table? Another way of doing it is to use the keyboard combination Control T. So hold down the Control, press the letter T. Once again, the Create Table dialog box comes into place. It selects the entire listing. My table has headers, which is actually the header. Click OK. And it's once again a list. If you go to table design, I have table number 2. Let's call it attendance. Perfect. And finally, I have classes. Classes might be a regular full day class or a workshop. So simply click on it. And this is another way of doing it, which you might find it weird, but this is really another way of doing it. Okay, so we are going to use this option. So in the home ribbon, under the style group, where you have the styles, you see the option about format as a table, right? So you click on the drop down arrow and you simply just select a format in this list. So if I decide to use the medium or the light, I click on ice blue and there you go. Again, the create table dialogs comes up. Select the range. My table has headers, which you have the headers. Simply click OK. A table's created and let's call this classes. Perfect, right? So we have classes. And if you look at the name box, there are your table classes names. Okay, you have names, attendance, there you go, classes, and everything. So let's go to the names, the very start of our list. And now let's start building our pivot table. Okay, so you ready? So in the name tab, again, click anywhere within the list. Okay, so what you could do is if you wanted to make sure that there's no filter button, so you take and remove the filter button. There you go. So I could remove the filter buttons on all of the tables to make sure that I don't have my filter buttons. Okay. If creating it, okay, allows you to remove the filter button. Next, so we go to insert. We're ready to do the insert. And we click on the pivot table. Now take a look. Instead of giving you the range, just like a while ago, it now gives you the name of the table. Okay. And it will create a pivot table on a new worksheet. But because we are actually using multiple tables, okay, so again, if you look down, look here, it says choose whether you want to analyze multiple tables, right? And we would like to do that. So put a check mark on add this data to the data model and simply click OK. There we go. So now look at the pivot table field list task pane on your right. Okay. And notice right here, I have the active, which is names, but there's another tab called all. And you see the list of the three different tables, the attendance, classes, and names. So which means I could use all the different fields, right, that are actually found in each table. However, these are separated tables. We have to set up the relationship between the tables. Now, the relationship must be established with the existing data model to be able to incorporate fields into the pivot table. So to create a relationship, one of the table must have a column of unique, non-repeated values. So to do that, let's use the data ribbon. And you have the data tools. And you see the relationship. There you go. Allow me to move it here so you can see the list, right? So in the Manage Relationship dialog box, we click on New to build our first relationship. And in here, we're going to build the relationship between the table that has a common field. So under my attendance and in the name, I have employee ID to be actually could be found in both. So I could click my first table, which is names. There we go. And I'm using employee ID, emp ID. And I'm going to have a build a relationship with the related table attendance. And if I click on the drop down, it also have an employee ID. So they could be related with a common field. Using those tables, click OK. Then we could create another one to connect the third one, which are actually names. So now we click the classes rather, sorry. So we have attendance. And what is common between attendance and classes is basically the class ID. So we select class ID. And for the classes, again, we select the class ID. Click OK. So that makes it connected. All we have to do now is click on close. And we could now structure our pivot table to answer the question, how many employees attended the training, right? So how do we do that? So once again, in the pivot table, expand all of those, which I did already, and use the data entry to the value to count how many. Okay. Again, it will give you the sum, but remember, we could always change the value settings from sum to count because we just wanted to get the count. So this is the actual count, 4,923. And in the classes, there you go, you could put the class name and drag it to the row. So that will tell me how many people have actually completed the training in Access 2003. So you know this is an old file that we have maintained, okay? But it tells you the number of employees attending each class, and towards the end, it gives you the grand total of 4,923. So let us save this, okay, and minimize this again, okay? Now, sometimes when you have data that you stored outside of Excel, for instance, you have a data in Access and and SQL Server in database, and you would like to use those data for pivot table. Is that possible? Yes, it is possible. But to be able to do that, you have to have, first of all, you have to have a blank worksheet. So let me just make sure this is saved. And I'm just going to create a new worksheet. There you go. So I have a new blank worksheet in here. Okay, so in an empty worksheet, what you do, but before you do that, I'm just going to show you the source so you see what I'm going to bring in. So I'm going to open an Access database. Okay. And I'm going to show you the source of data. So this is attendance. There you go. Can you see it? I have three tables in here. Attendance, similar to what we have in Excel a while ago. Classes, and table names, but they are in Access. So we want to bring this data to Excel. So allow me to close this so you know where the source is. So I'm back to Excel in a blank workbook, right? So in an empty worksheet, click on the cell in the worksheet with IM. So now you're going to go to your Insert tab in your ribbon. And once again, in the pivot table, if you click on the drop-down arrow, you are going to get the data from an external data source. Okay. And you are going to choose a connection. And we browse for the connection. So we look for the data, and my data is in this folder, and it's called an attendance data. That's a new source. So I click open. And notice when I open it, right, you see the table select. So I will enable selection of multiple tables. If I want to select all of those, you simply click on the checkbox before the name and all of them become selected. So all you have to do is click OK to include them. So now the connection is actually built. Can you see it? So it's a pivot table from an external source. Now when it's done, you simply click on OK. And there you go. You have the list right here. There you go. See that? Now, normally in Access database, they have also relationship have been built. But if you wanted to make sure that relationship is really built, you could actually check. Okay. If it's not, then you do the same thing as what we did earlier, where we created the attendance and basically we use employee ID with the names and employee ID. And the other ones, we were using classes, okay? And we use class ID, correct? And we also use attendance with a class ID, okay? And click close. Then we could do the same thing as what we did earlier, where we wanted to find out the number of students, right? That we would like to actually um, find. So we are going to use for the pivot table, we will use the data entry for our values. Okay. Replace the sum with the count. Click OK. And we are going to select the number, the name of the classes and put it in the row area. Beautiful, isn't it? So that's also possible. Okay. And that allows you to be able to do so. So that's basically the, how to create a pivot table from scratch. Now, earlier I mentioned that I am going to demonstrate to you how to use also the recommended pivot table. So let me go back to a previous worksheet where I have my exercise here. I'm going to use the original, okay, where I have this in, mandated training list. And when you don't have enough time to create a pivot table and you're asked to use it, what you could actually also use is the recommended pivot table. So once you have cleaned and prepared your data, just click anywhere within, and in your insert ribbon under the tables, click on recommended pivot table. And there you go. You have your recommended pivot table already. And in my recommended pivot table, you notice you have different scenarios set in here. The sum of hours by employee. You scroll, the sum of hours by pay business unit, sum of the hours by the union, and you have the count of employee ID, the sum of hours, sum of costs, count of employee ID with a status. It's almost similar to what we created, and count of employee ID by business unit. This is the closest, just like what we have created earlier, correct? And if go down to the list, you see different types of scenario that would fit the condition and the status or the report you would like to build. So if I'm going to use the count of employee by business unit, I think this is similar to what we have created. All you have to do is click on it and click OK. And there you go. Similar to what we have. Similar to what's this a while ago, and this is this. And once again, you could actually customize it the way you wanted it to be. As I mentioned earlier, you could go to pivot table analyze. If you wanted to expand all right there, just simply click on the first one, and you could actually look at this under the active field. You have a way of expanding and collapsing. So if you wanted to expand all of them will be expanded, and collapse will collapse all. But if you wanted to expand and collapse one at a time, also you could actually drill down if you just want to be very specific. Let's say I wanted to just double click on the count. Notice how it will open and give me another worksheet containing only those that are coming from that agency. Take a look. That's actually gave you the department, one specific department. Okay, so that's basically how the bridges and tunnel. So that's basically how it is. So I hope you have actually seen and view all of this. Let me go back to our PowerPoint presentation and give you some time to, in here, in this PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to share with you. I will give you this deck with the link to the multiple site. Okay, these are basically from Microsoft Office. How to create a pivot table to analyze, okay, and external data, multiple tables to create a pivot table, how to create a data model, delete a pivot table in Microsoft Word. Okay, so you will have all of this. I will, after this class, I am going to send you this as soon as I'm able to get the attendance of the names of the employee who are with me this afternoon. I will obtain the summary from Zoom and share that with you. Also, if I may ask you, if you have time right now, if you could help me complete the survey for this class. I will also include this in the email. By the way, I have multiple survey that I will send to you. This is the first set of survey. When I send you the recording, I will give you another set of survey that, hopefully will be available to help us evaluate and plan for the future. Have a good afternoon, and thank you for joining me this afternoon. Goodbye.